Have you ever had the feeling that life keeps tapping you on the shoulder, but every time you turn around, nothing seems to be there? The same kinds of disappointments appear wearing different faces. Certain conversations linger in your mind longer than they should. A door closes, another opens, and somehow both seem connected to something you can't quite name. It's strange, because part of you suspects there's a pattern beneath it all, yet another part keeps telling you it's probably nothing. What if the moments you've been dismissing are the very things trying to get your attention? Not through words, but through repetition, through coincidence, through emotions that arrive with unusual intensity. There are messages that don't come as answers. They come disguised as delays, frustrations, unexpected encounters, and the unsettling feeling that reality is pointing towards something you're not seeing yet. And if you've been feeling lately that something is changing, even if you can't explain what, then there may be a reason this message found you today. There are certain experiences that seem to follow people through different stages of life. The details change, the faces change, the circumstances change, yet the emotional atmosphere remains strangely familiar. You leave one job and find yourself facing the same conflict somewhere else. You end one relationship only to encounter the same tension with someone new. After a while, it begins to feel less like coincidence and more like a pattern hiding in plain sight. Most people assume recurring problems are evidence of bad luck. They tell themselves they've simply met the wrong people or been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But reality has a curious habit. When something remains unseen, it often returns wearing a different disguise. Not because life is punishing you, but because something important remains unfinished beneath the surface. Think about a lesson a child avoids learning in school. The subject doesn't disappear simply because it's ignored. It returns in another assignment, another test, another challenge. Life seems to operate through a similar principle. Experiences often repeat until the meaning hidden inside them becomes visible. The event itself is rarely the message. The pattern is. You've probably noticed this in moments that left you wondering, why does this keep happening to me? Maybe people repeatedly underestimate you. Maybe you find yourself giving more than you receive. Maybe opportunities seem to arrive only to vanish at the last moment. The specific situation matters less than the recurring emotional signature attached to it. What's fascinating is that the mind tends to focus on external details while ignoring internal repetition. It notices new environments but overlooks familiar reactions. Yet the reaction is often where the hidden information lies. Reality doesn't only reveal itself through what happens. It reveals itself through what repeatedly happens inside you when it does. There comes a point when frustration begins to transform into curiosity. Instead of asking why the problem exists, another question emerges. Why this problem? Why this theme? Why this particular challenge again and again? That shift changes everything, because it moves attention away from blame and toward observation. Sometimes the pattern survives because it is connected to a belief you no longer consciously recognize. A quiet assumption formed years ago. A conclusion about yourself, other people, or the world. These conclusions often remain hidden because they've become so familiar they feel like facts rather than interpretations. And once you begin noticing that recurring challenges may be carrying information rather than simply causing suffering, another unsettling possibility appears. What if the people involved in those patterns have been showing you something about yourself all along? Everyone remembers at least one person who seemed to affect them far more deeply than logic could explain. Someone whose words lingered for days. Someone who triggered anger, insecurity, frustration, or even fascination. Long after the interaction ended, part of the experience remained alive inside you. At first glance, difficult people appear to be obstacles. They seem like interruptions standing between you and the life you want. Yet certain individuals provoke reactions that feel strangely disproportionate. Two people can hear the same criticism. One shrugs it off. The other carries it for weeks. The difference often reveals something hidden beneath the surface. This doesn't mean every conflict is your responsibility. Some people are genuinely harmful, manipulative, or careless. But even then, their presence can illuminate something important. Not because they are teachers in the traditional sense, but because they activate parts of yourself that normally remain invisible. Imagine a mirror that only reflects certain angles under specific lighting conditions. Many inner wounds operate this way. You may not know they're there until someone accidentally touches them. The reaction becomes a clue, not a verdict. Not proof that something is wrong with you. Simply evidence that something unresolved has become visible. The strange thing is that people often spend years trying to change the mirror instead of examining what it reflects. They become obsessed with the person. They replay conversations. They analyze motives. Meanwhile, the deeper question remains untouched. Why did this affect me so strongly? Sometimes the answer has little to do with the other person. Their behavior merely collided with an old fear. A fear of rejection. A fear of abandonment. A fear of not being enough. The emotional intensity comes not from the present moment alone, but from everything the moment awakens. Many of the relationships that change us most are not comfortable ones. They expose contradictions we would rather avoid. They reveal strengths we didn't know we possessed. They force us to confront assumptions that had been quietly shaping our lives for years. And yet even the clearest mirror can only reveal part of the message. Because beyond the people who challenge us lies something equally mysterious. The doors that close unexpectedly, the opportunities that disappear, and the rejections that seem to arrive without explanation may be communicating something we rarely consider. Few experiences feel more personal than rejection. A message goes unanswered. An opportunity slips away. A relationship ends despite your effort. In those moments, the mind rushes to create explanations, and most of them point inward. Not good enough. Not worthy enough. Not ready enough. Rejection has a way of making people question their value long before they question their interpretation. Yet something curious happens with enough time. Many people eventually look back on the moments they once considered devastating and realize they were standing at the edge of a path they were never meant to continue. What felt like loss in the moment later reveals itself as redirection. Not because every rejection is secretly a gift, but because reality often provides information before it provides understanding. Think about how often expectations shape perception. When you become attached to a specific outcome, anything that interrupts it feels wrong. The mind assumes that what you wanted must also be what you needed. But life rarely confirms that assumption. Again and again, people discover that their greatest disappointments protected them from futures they could not yet see clearly. You've probably experienced this yourself. Something you desperately wanted failed to happen. At first there was confusion, maybe even resentment. Then months or years later, a wider perspective emerged. Suddenly the closed door no longer looked like punishment. It looked like a turning point. The event had not changed. Only your ability to understand it had. The hidden truth is that rejection often exposes where your identity has become entangled with an outcome. When something falls apart, the pain is not always caused by losing the opportunity itself. Sometimes the pain comes from losing the version of yourself that expected to exist because of it. That distinction changes everything. Reality seems to communicate through friction as much as through flow. When something repeatedly collapses, despite enormous effort, it may be revealing a misalignment that logic alone cannot detect. This doesn't mean you should give up at the first obstacle. Many meaningful things require persistence. But there is a difference between resistance that strengthens you and resistance that keeps pointing toward a deeper truth. One of the most overlooked forms of feedback arrives through disappointment. Disappointment. Disappointment strips away fantasy. It forces you to see what was actually there rather than what you hoped would be there. Painful as that process can be, it often brings clarity that success never could. Success tends to confirm existing beliefs. Rejection challenges them. And perhaps that is why rejection feels so unsettling. It interrupts the story you were telling yourself. It forces you into uncertainty. Yet uncertainty is where hidden assumptions begin to reveal themselves. The beliefs operating beneath the surface suddenly become visible because reality has stopped cooperating with them. Which raises an even deeper question. If recurring outcomes are not random, and if rejection can expose hidden assumptions, then what other patterns might be revealing beliefs you don't even realize you're carrying? Most people think they see reality as it is. But what if a large part of what you experience is filtered through beliefs so familiar that you no longer notice them? Not opinions, not conscious decisions, deeper assumptions, quiet conclusions about who you are, what you deserve, what is possible, and how the world works. These beliefs rarely announce themselves. They don't walk into your awareness and introduce themselves by name. Instead, they operate in the background, shaping perception like invisible lenses. You may believe you're responding to reality objectively, while unknowingly responding to a version of reality filtered through expectations formed years ago. Imagine someone who secretly believes they are always overlooked. They may enter a room and unconsciously notice every sign that confirms that belief. A missed greeting, a delayed response, a forgotten invitation. Meanwhile, evidence that contradicts the belief fades into the background. The pattern becomes self-reinforcing, not because reality is conspiring against them, but because attention itself has become selective. The remarkable thing is that reality often reveals these hidden beliefs through repetition. Similar outcomes begin appearing across different areas of life. Different circumstances produce familiar emotional results. The details vary, but the underlying theme remains consistent. It's almost as if life keeps highlighting the same sentence hidden beneath the surface. You may have noticed periods when the same emotional lesson seemed to appear everywhere at once. A conflict at work echoes a conflict at home. A disappointment in one area reflects a frustration in another. At first, these events appear unrelated, but eventually a deeper structure begins to emerge. The events are different. The pattern is the same. This is where many people make an important discovery. The recurring outcome is not necessarily the message. The recurring interpretation is. Reality may not be repeating itself nearly as much as your way of relating to it is. The external world becomes a screen upon which old assumptions continue projecting themselves. What's fascinating is that unconscious beliefs often survive because they once served a purpose. Perhaps they protected you from disappointment. Perhaps they helped you make sense of uncertainty. But what once protected you can eventually begin limiting you. A belief formed in one chapter of life may continue influencing decisions long after its usefulness has expired. Then something unexpected happens. As hidden beliefs become visible, certain opportunities begin appearing differently. Situations that once felt impossible suddenly seem attainable. Relationships feel different. Choices feel different. Yet not every opportunity remains. Some arrive briefly and disappear almost as quickly. And that raises another mystery. Why do certain possibilities enter your life only to vanish before they can fully take root? Have you ever noticed how some opportunities seem to arrive with perfect timing, only to disappear before they can become something real? A new relationship begins with incredible promise and then slowly fades. A career breakthrough appears out of nowhere, but somehow slips through your hands. A chance encounter feels important, almost destined, yet never develops into what you imagined. Most people interpret these experiences as simple bad luck. They assume they missed their chance or made the wrong decision. Sometimes that's true. But there are moments when something deeper is happening. Not every opportunity enters your life to stay. Some arrive to reveal where you currently stand. Life has a strange way of introducing possibilities before you're fully prepared to hold them. Not as punishment, but as information. Sometimes an opportunity appears not to reward readiness, but to expose the gap between what you desire and what you can presently sustain. The appearance itself becomes part of the message. Think about how often people dream of change without realizing that change demands a new version of themselves. They want the relationship but not the vulnerability. The freedom but not the responsibility. The success but not the uncertainty that comes with it. The opportunity arrives, and suddenly the hidden tension becomes visible. This is why certain experiences feel almost magical at first. They seem to come from nowhere. They awaken excitement, possibility, and hope. For a brief moment, you glimpse a different future. Yet the real significance may not lie in whether the opportunity remains. It may lie in what it reveals about your relationship to that future. Many people focus entirely on external circumstances when something falls apart. They examine timing, logistics, luck, and other people. Rarely do they ask whether part of them was unconsciously resisting what they consciously wanted. Yet inner conflict often leaves traces. Hesitation, self-sabotage, fear disguised as practicality. What's fascinating is that reality often exposes these contradictions gently at first. A delay here, a misunderstanding there, a recurring obstacle that seems insignificant on its own. Only later do you realize that these small signals were pointing toward something larger. Not failure, but misalignment. And then there are opportunities that vanish despite your best efforts, despite your readiness, despite your commitment. Those experiences carry a different mystery. Sometimes life removes what no longer belongs because something else is trying to emerge. The problem is that the mind usually notices the loss long before it notices the space being created. The deeper question, then, is how reality communicates these shifts before they become obvious. If opportunities can function as messages, perhaps emotions can as well. Perhaps some of the feelings you've been carrying are not random reactions at all, but signals pointing towards something important. Most people treat emotions as consequences. Something happens, and then they feel something about it. Simple, direct, obvious. But what if emotions are doing more than reacting to reality? What if they are also revealing your relationship to it? Consider how quickly your emotional state can change without any obvious external reason. You walk into a familiar place and suddenly feel uneasy. You meet someone for the first time and experience an unexpected sense of trust. You wake up feeling restless even though nothing appears wrong. These moments often get dismissed, yet they may contain information that logic hasn't caught up to yet. There is a reason certain situations drain you while others energize you. A reason some environments create tension while others bring relief. Emotions often detect patterns long before conscious thought can explain them. They are not always accurate, but they are rarely meaningless. Think about frustration. Most people view it as something to eliminate. Yet frustration frequently appears when reality collides with an expectation you're holding. The feeling itself becomes a clue. Not necessarily that something is wrong, but that there is a gap between what is and what you believe should be. Then there is resistance. One of the most misunderstood experiences in human life. Sometimes resistance is fear trying to protect you from growth. Other times it is wisdom warning you that something is not aligned. The challenge is that both sensations can feel remarkably similar. This is why self-awareness becomes more important than certainty. You may have noticed moments when excitement appeared before any logical justification existed. A new idea, a conversation, a place you've never visited. Something inside you became alert, not because you knew where it would lead, but because some deeper part of you recognized significance before understanding arrived. Peace works in a similar way. Genuine peace is not merely the absence of problems. Sometimes it appears in the middle of uncertainty. Sometimes it arrives when nothing has been resolved externally. It carries a quiet quality that feels different from temporary comfort. Almost as if part of you recognizes that you're moving in the right direction, even without proof. What's rarely discussed is that reality often communicates through contrast. Excitement and exhaustion. Expansion and contraction. Relief and tension. These emotional movements create a kind of language. Not a language of words, but a language of patterns. One that becomes easier to recognize once you stop fighting every feeling that appears. And yet emotions do not exist in isolation. They interact constantly with the places you inhabit, the people around you, and the atmosphere you create through repeated thoughts and behaviors. Which leads to an even stranger possibility. What if the environment surrounding you is reflecting aspects of your inner world more than you've ever realized? Most people think of their environment as something separate from them, a collection of circumstances, places, and people that simply happen to exist around them. Yet if you pay close attention, you'll begin to notice something unusual. Different periods of your life seem to create different worlds around you, even when many external factors remain the same. Think back to a time when you felt lost. Chances are, the world itself appeared heavier. Small problems seemed larger. Opportunities were harder to recognize. Conversations felt different. It wasn't that reality had completely changed overnight. It was that your relationship with reality had changed, and everything else was filtered through that shift. The opposite is true as well. There are moments when nothing significant changes externally, yet suddenly possibilities appear everywhere. You notice people differently. Ideas arrive more easily. Coincidences seem more frequent. The same city feels different. The same routine feels different. This doesn't mean your thoughts magically control the universe. Reality is far more complex than that. But your inner state influences what you notice, what you pursue, what you avoid, and what meaning you assign to events. In many ways, the environment you experience is partly shaped by the lens through which you're viewing it. Have you ever cleaned a room after feeling emotionally overwhelmed? The physical space hadn't caused all your discomfort, yet changing the environment often changes something inside you as well. The relationship moves both ways. Inner patterns shape outer experience, and outer experience reinforces inner patterns. This may explain why certain people repeatedly find themselves surrounded by similar situations. Not because they consciously choose them, but because familiar emotional states often pull attention toward familiar experiences. The environment becomes an echo chamber of assumptions, expectations, and habits that have been operating for years. What's fascinating is that reality seems to provide feedback through these echoes. The people around you, the conversations you keep having, the situations that repeatedly arise. They are not exact reflections, but they often contain traces of something occurring within, like fragments of a larger message scattered throughout everyday life. And once you begin seeing your environment as part of the conversation rather than merely the setting, a profound question emerges. What if reality itself has been speaking all along, not through random events, but through patterns waiting to be read differently? Most people spend their lives asking one question: how do I get rid of this problem? It's a natural response. When something hurts, frustrates, delays, or confuses us, we want it gone. We want answers. We want resolution. We want life to return to normal. But what if some experiences are not interruptions of your path? What if they are part of it? Imagine receiving a letter written in a language you don't yet understand. At first, the symbols appear meaningless. You might even become irritated by them. Yet the problem is not the letter itself. The problem is that its meaning remains hidden. Life often works in a surprisingly similar way. The recurring challenge may be carrying information. The difficult relationship may be exposing something unseen. The rejection may be redirecting your attention. The emotional reaction may be revealing an expectation. The environment may be reflecting a pattern. None of these experiences necessarily arrive to stop you. They may be arriving to show you something. This perspective changes the nature of suffering. Not because pain disappears, not because every event suddenly makes sense, but because curiosity begins replacing helplessness. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" another question appears. What is this trying to show me? The remarkable thing is that reality rarely shouts. It whispers, through repetition, through synchronicity, through strange timing, through emotions that refuse to go away, through patterns so familiar that they become invisible. The message often isn't hidden because it's difficult to find. It's hidden because it appears so often that we stop noticing it. Perhaps this is why certain experiences return again and again. Not to trap you, but to invite you into a deeper understanding of yourself. Reality seems remarkably patient. It keeps presenting the lesson in different forms, waiting for the moment when recognition finally occurs. And maybe that moment is happening now. Maybe some pattern you've been fighting, avoiding, or misunderstanding suddenly looks different than it did an hour ago. Maybe you're beginning to realize that life has not been working against you as much as it has been trying to communicate with you, because the greatest shift doesn't happen when reality changes. It happens when you learn how to listen. If there's one thing to take from this journey, it's that your life may be far more meaningful than it sometimes appears. The recurring problems, the difficult people, the disappointments, the opportunities that arrived and vanished, the emotions you couldn't explain, the patterns you kept noticing. None of them may be as random as they first seemed. Perhaps reality has been speaking to you through repetition, because repetition gets our attention. Perhaps it has been using relationships, emotions, environments, and circumstances as a kind of language. Not a language of certainty, but a language of clues. Small signals pointing towards something deeper waiting to be understood. The truth is that you don't need to have all the answers right now. You don't need to decode every coincidence or explain every mystery. Sometimes the transformation begins the moment you stop treating life as a series of isolated events and start seeing it as a conversation unfolding over time. And if this message found you at a moment when you've been questioning certain patterns in your own life, perhaps that's worth paying attention to. Not because anyone else says it matters, but because something inside you recognized it. If this video resonated with you, consider subscribing and joining us for future explorations of the hidden patterns shaping human experience. If you found meaning in what we've discussed today, leave a like so more people who may need this message can discover it as well. And before you go, leave the word "messagey" in the comments. Just that single word. Sometimes a single word is enough to acknowledge that you've started noticing what was always there.